And we're back again for another episode of Cultural Caravan TV. We're continuing our conversation with the extraordinary career diplomat, Ambassador Harriet Elam Thomas. In a stellar career with the U.S. Foreign Service that has spanned over 42 years, she has dedicated herself to bridging cultures across numerous international posts, including assignments in Greece, Turkey, France, Belgium, Senegal, Mali, and Cote d'Ivoire, not to mention some of her domestic posts, which included work at the United Nations as well as in the White House, all of which led former President Bill Clinton to appoint her as the ambassador to Senegal. After such a wonderful career, she retired in 2005, but we're not sure so much that she's really retired because she currently is the director of the University of Central Florida's Diplomacy Program. She also is the author of a new book entitled Diversifying Diplomacy: My Journey from Roxbury to Dakar, which chronicles her extraordinary personal and professional experiences. But if that was not enough, she is also launching a conversation series that talks about civility strategies that people here in the United States can use to be better democratic within our own culture. Somebody that is as accomplished as she is, as we talked about in the former episode, but also is a recipient of numerous awards and accolades from people as illustrious as the Prime Minister of Turkey, cultural leaders in Greece, as well as the recipient of the State Department's Director General's Cup for Foreign Service, an award that is only presented to diplomats who have made significant contributions to the advancement of U.S. foreign policy abroad in their service to the nation. Welcome once again to Cultural Caravan TV.
And again, it's my pleasure to be with you.
So at this time, you're embarking on a conversation series where you say that you're going to share civility strategies in order to restore respect, civility, and democracy here in America. Why this and why now?
In today's world, as all of us, we've witnessed the absence of civility across the board. And about 4 months or 5 months ago, I was asked to do a civility series at the Ferguson Library in Stamford, Connecticut. And I said to myself, this is an issue that touches the entire society, and it really is part and parcel of diplomacy. And I thought, why not talk with university students and civic organizations about the importance of civility, beginning at home, as well as in international affairs. How do you try to heal a society that is already so fractured? How do you heal the world that is so fractured? So that was the reason why I thought I would begin a conversation about civility and strategies to heal our society.
Can you share or give us a little bit of a taste of some of the civility strategies that you think can restore democracy here in the United States?
Well, we often talk about in vino veritas. With a glass of wine, people relax. I understand that even in the United States, holidays are difficult for families because there are people who are on different political sides of the fence, and they don't want to even communicate over a dinner. But there is a way in which you can do that because all of the men and women, let's face it, they have an interest, a mutual interest, whether it's in sports, whether it is in performing arts. Why not use that as a mechanism, even at home, to have people sit down in a room who might not ordinarily be seated in a room? We did that in the Cold War when you had communist Europe and Americans, and we wanted people to communicate with one another. There's no reason why we cannot use the same technique in the United States. So that's the first, and I must say, I'm optimistic that that might be an initial step. Others would include encouraging teachers to welcome children who are from another country in a classroom, have them talk about their background, their traditions, in a way in which is not threatening so that other children would be curious about what are the main holidays in Guatemala? What might be some of the main holidays in Senegal that you celebrate? What is it? What does Ramadan really mean? Why do people not eat? And what is so important at the end of the holiday? You come together. You communicate, usually over a meal.
And these are things that I think are going to be really powerful tools, particularly at this time in our nation when you have people who are very well educated, people who come from all sorts of walks of life, sometimes in the same family, but that have diverse points of view. Absolutely. And sit on totally opposite sides of the fence when it comes to some of our current political issues domestically. So I think that those are some words that a lot of people will take to heart, whether in their homes or in their workplace, when they're trying to foster domestic civility as well. However, there's another aspect of some of your current work. Again, I said it's hard to believe that you're actually retired. As a matter of fact, you currently sit on the advisory board of the University of Central Florida's Center for the Study of Human Trafficking and Modern-Day Slavery program. And through your involvement with that, I understand that you have some very strong opinions about how immigrants and refugees are being treated, particularly in regards to the separation of children from families. Can you tell us a little bit more about your views on that?
I come from a generation that remembers what happened in terms of the days of slavery. That's not so far back for my recollection. And I can remember my mother taking care of children who didn't look like me, as well as the 5 children that she had to raise. I have not seen the film The Help because I said my mother was the help. To think of a child being taken from his or her parent is the most inhumane thing I can ever imagine. And how do you build a society if you've already taken away what is the life force of any society? I find it mean-spirited, and I can only say that I have every bit of disdain for the decision-making process that brought this into being. Now, I understand there is an attempt to change that decision, but these children are scarred for life because of the experience of not being able to find their parents. Who are we to be the judges of who should be allowed to come in the United States and who should not? We did this to the Japanese. We've done this over and over in our history. And then these children could easily be targeted to be trafficked in oh so many industries around the world.
And it's interesting that you should say that, because I think that probably a lot of people don't believe that that can happen here. But like, what were some of your experiences as an international diplomat that make you think that that could be something that would happen to these young people that are being separated from their families here in the United States?
I often thought that I was pretty sophisticated in terms of reading people and understanding what made people tick, because I had learned to live in so many different environments as the other. I spent 35 years out of the United States being the other. But I made a very serious mistake in judgment in looking at children begging in Senegal, thinking that they were without funds, not knowing this was part of a very huge human trafficking system called the Talibé in Senegal in West Africa, where children are sent to what they are told their parents think are Quranic schools. And then they're forced to go out in the public in downtown and the big cities of Dakar or Saint Louis and beg and beg and beg. And if they don't bring X amount of money back to the village chief, then they are beaten and treated inhumanely. They grow up with absolutely no education, no ability to read or write. So that's in Senegal. But in the United States, we have young women who are in colleges and universities who are picked up on campuses because they need money to finish the payment of their tuition. And they're told that we will be able to help you do that, by taking pictures. And then that becomes another possibility that I had never thought about. I'm saying on college campuses. I'm not saying in the mall, walking around and being picked up there. No, on college campuses. That was the most sobering experience I'd ever heard about, and I've been with young women where that has happened. The Human Trafficking Institute brings the ugly side of America to light, because the biggest events of the year are the Super Bowls and the major sports championships, where these women are taken to these parts of the country and are indeed servicing the men. So the Department of State recognized that finally, but they have yet to use slavery in the title. They talk about human trafficking because the term slavery is one that rings terribly true to all of us. And so it's only the office that is anti-human trafficking to this day, but we were trying to lobby for it to be an modern-day slavery.
Ambassador, you're currently the director of the University of Central Florida's diplomacy program. Considering some of the things that you said about the value of diversity within our foreign service, tell us a little bit more about how that program supports that and your role in particular.
I think it's important now because we can say we have about 8 or 10 career diplomats who are from the time, who have become career diplomats since I arrived. But the diplomacy program is part of the political science department, the international relations department as well, where young men and women may not necessarily go into the Department of State, but they could work at the World Bank or with NGOs around the world. What the diplomacy program has done has piqued the interests of many young women and men of color who may not have looked at this as a potential career because there are 2 major fellowships, the Pickering Fellowship and the Rangel Fellowship, that are geared to women and minorities and first-generation college goers. To become career diplomats, they will have to work for the Department of State for 5 years. But it has done so much to begin to broaden what has been a white male institution for the past 50 years, if not longer. Colin Powell came and said, we want a diplomatic service that looks like America. And for a while, it began to change, but then budget crunches came into being, and they stopped hiring for 3 years, which almost happened again with this administration in January of this year. But thank goodness, members of Congress realized the importance of the State Department's educational and cultural exchange budget. And we were able to continue the programs like the one that I run at the University of Central Florida. When you have diversity in the Foreign Service, then you have the perspective of Middle America. They're not all white, male, pale, and Yale graduates. They understand, for instance, in Turkey, the Turks wanted to be members of the European Union when I was there from 90 through 94. And they felt they were being discriminated against because they were a Muslim country. And they felt that as the American representative in Turkey that dealt with that issue in the foreign ministry, I could be more sensitive because I was a person of color. And I knew what it was like to be discriminated against. So I was able to reach them, and they felt I was far more sincere in pushing America's efforts to help the Turks become members of the European Union. Now, the Turkish government just had an election yesterday, and the current president is not someone that many people are happy with, including myself. But I can tell you from 90 through 94, there was a different leadership in Turkey, and we were very, very conscious of the need for Turkey to be a member of the European Union.
How can people get in contact with you about the conversation series, and particularly some of the civility strategies that you mentioned?
The conversation series, they certainly can reach me through the Terry Williams Agency, because they have been at the forefront of making sure that the world understands a little bit more about diplomacy writ large, the importance of civility in communicating with our fellow man or woman, And secondly, the book itself is available both in major bookstores but online, and certainly at an event that's going to take place very soon, in fact later this week, here at this particular site, the Maison d'Art, here in Harlem, where I will talk more about the importance of social justice writ large. We as a country are often held up as the role model for democracy, but we're not doing such a good job these days of leading the pack. And if we do not do some of the things that I would like to share with others, Starbucks was a good example. They corrected their initial approach, but they went to people who were in and of the culture and who had suffered the indignities and were able to communicate to the ownership and the leadership of Starbucks of why what transpired in that store should never transpire again. To be very candid with you, I'd like to see them take that to the next step, to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Powerful words indeed. I think that people of all walks of life are going to watch this and actually heed what you say and hopefully join that conversation that you're starting in regards to civility right here on our shores. Ambassador, it has been once again an honor and a pleasure to be in your presence. Thank you so much for your past service, your continued service, and thank you for sharing your story with Cultural Caravan TV.
Well, you've certainly made me a welcomed guest, and I look forward to reaching out and sharing this experience with you as this conversation on civility continues. Thank you.
Well, we thank you for joining us for another very special edition of Cultural Caravan TV. We encourage you to continue to watch, tell a friend, write, tweet about it, and even make a donation.
If you would like to support these broadcasts, we encourage you to send contributions to P.O. Box 300851, Jamaica, New York 11430. Thank you. Let's welcome Joe Patan.
jumping in the city. West Indian happy, happy whole time for Labor Day. I tell you, no problem, for we take over Harlem Sunday, eve of Labor Day. Virgin Islands crew in town, St. Thomas, St. Croix, and St. John. When you hear the cowbell ring, Harlem will be jumping. Hey, hey, Carnival, hey, hey, Bacchanal, hey, hey, Carnival, oh yeah. Virgin Islands in town for Labor Day. The action will be heavy. People from the
I realized that to learn about the people, you study the dance. And when you study the dance, you learn the history of the people, because dance in traditional African cultures used to preserve, and so that the young coming forth learn by age group. And as I said, you know, I'm skipping years. In traditional African cultures, you learn by age group. So you would have the toddlers who will be going around, they aren't paying any attention, but they are, because these rhythms are becoming a part. And then as they go into the initiation rites, everything is explained. Then after the initiation, then they are ready for courtship and marriage, and then maybe baby naming ceremonies, and on and up until time they make the transition to the grand ancestral grounds.
to us about the importance of celebrating this legend and her family.
Well, the longevity of it, the quality, the non-negotiable dignity, that's kind of what Ruby and Asa represented. I remember as a child in South Carolina when Jack Robinson was the ultimate hero for all of us, the great breakthrough, Ruby and Jack Robinson doing the Jack Robinson story. That was a big deal. There were no black anchors on TV at that time, none, anywhere in America. So the forerunner on screen, on stage, but their stardom did not take them into another world. It took them to the ground where the people were. In so many ways, Oz and Ruby are like reality TV. They're like real stuff. What you see is what you get. And whether it was marching in Selma, Alabama with Dr. King, also doing Malcolm X's funeral, calling him Sweet Prince. I mean, this Asa, I remember the first Black Caucus meeting, after Dr. King had been killed, and we were searching for our way. We lost this huge giant. It was Asa Davis who says, not the rap is the map, not the man's the plan. That's Asa too.